Imagine a man who has everything: power, wealth, control, yet nothing that truly matters. A billionaire who built an empire with cold precision, who scoffed at love as a weakness for fools until one stormy night shattered his entire world. This isn't just a love story. This is about the moment fate forces even the most untouchable man to his knees. And if you've ever wondered what it would take to break someone who thinks they're unbreakable, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll get the answer you came for. Let me ask you something. Have you ever met someone who changed you in a single moment? Not gradually, not after years, but in one breath, one glance, one collision of souls so fierce it rewires your DNA? That's what happens to him. Alexander Graves, ruthless, untouchable, a man who could buy cities but never bought into love. Until her. A woman with no name, no history, just a figure standing in the rain like a ghost waiting to haunt him. And here's the mystery you're itching to solve. Why her? Out of all the people in the world, why does this woman, a stranger drenched in a midnight storm, become the one thing his money can't conquer? I know what you're thinking. Another rich guy falls for a normal girl, Clee. But trust me, this isn't that story. There's something darker here. Something hidden beneath the thunder and the way she looks at him like she already knows his sins. Maybe she does. Maybe that's the real hook: she shouldn't exist in his world. Yet here she is, unraveling him with every second. And the storm? It's not just weather. It's a character, a force pushing them together for reasons neither understands yet. Here's what I'll reveal: by the time this night is over, Alexander won't be the same man. And neither will you. Because this story plays with a question we've all secretly wondered. What if the person you're meant to find is also the one who could destroy you? I see you nodding. You've felt that pull before, the terrifying thrill of meeting someone who could either save you or ruin you, and not knowing which scares you more. That's the tension we're diving into. But before we go further, let's get one thing straight: this isn't a fairy tale. It's a collision. A test. And the storm is just the beginning. Because the real question isn't whether they'll fall in love. It's what they'll have to sacrifice to survive it. So tell me, are you ready to find out what happens when a man who controls everything meets the one thing he can't control? Good. Then don't move. The storm's about to get worse. And you're right in the middle of it. The storm wasn't just rain and wind, it was a reckoning. Alexander Graves had spent his life building walls, not just around his empire, but around himself. He didn't believe in fate, only control. Yet here he was, standing on the dimly lit balcony of his penthouse, watching her through the downpour like she was a hallucination. A woman in a tattered coat, her face half hidden by the storm, standing motionless in the alley below as if she'd been waiting for him. And the strangest part? The way she looked up, meeting his gaze like she already knew him. Like she'd been expecting this moment for years. You've felt that before, haven't you? That eerie sense of déjà vu, like the universe is pulling you towards something or someone you can't explain. That's what Alexander couldn't shake. He should have called security. He should have walked away. But something deeper, something primal, made him step into the elevator and descend into the storm. And that's when the real mystery begins. Because the woman Lena, as he'd later learn, wasn't just some stranger. She was a ghost from a past he'd buried, a past even he didn't fully remember. Here's what you need to know about Alexander: he wasn't just rich. He was ruthless. The kind of man who turned competitors into casualties and called it business. Love? He laughed at the idea. Romance was a transaction, another deal to negotiate. But Lena didn't want his money. She didn't even seem to want him. What she wanted was answers about a night 12 years ago, a fire at an old coastal estate, and a missing girl no one ever found. The problem? Alexander was there that night. And the deeper he digs, the more he realizes he might be the reason she's here. Now, let's talk about her. Lena wasn't just beautiful, she was dangerous. Not in the way you'd expect, not with weapons or threats, but with silence. The kind of silence that makes a man like Alexander, who's used to dominating every room, feel like he's the one being hunted. She spoke in riddles, her words laced with hints of a life stolen, a family erased. And the storm? It followed her. Not just rain, but something darker, whispers in the wind, shadows that moved when no one was watching. Even the city itself seemed to bend around her, like reality was fraying at the edges. But here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just their story. There's a third player, Daniel Carter, Alexander's oldest friend and the only man who knows what really happened that night 12 years ago. Daniel's been cleaning up Alexander's messes for decades, but this time, he's not helping. He's hiding something. And the closer Alexander gets to Lena, the more Daniel's loyalty starts to crack. Secrets have a way of rotting even the strongest bonds, and this one? It's been festering for years. So where does that leave us? With a billionaire who's losing control, a woman who might be his salvation or his ruin, and a storm that feels less like weather and more like a warning. Because here's the truth, some doors, once opened, can't be closed. And Alexander's about to step through one that will change everything. The rain was coming down in sheets now, the kind of storm that drowns out screams and washes away evidence. Alexander stood inches from Lena, close enough to see the flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Was it fear or recognition? She reached into her coat, and for a heartbeat, he thought she might pull a weapon. Instead, she handed him a photograph, its edges curled with age, the image faded but unmistakable, a young girl with wide, terrified eyes, standing in front of that same coastal estate from his nightmares. The date scrawled on the back? The night of the fire. The night he'd been told no one died. But the girl in this photo? She was looking straight at the camera like she knew she wouldn't survive the next hour. And written in smudged ink at the bottom were two words that sent ice through his veins. Save me? You know that moment when the ground shifts under you? When everything you thought was true cracks open and reveals something darker beneath? That's where Alexander was now. Because the girl in the photo wasn't just some missing child, she was Lena's sister. And Lena hadn't come for revenge. She'd come for the truth. The problem? Alexander didn't have the truth. He'd been blackout drunk that night, a fact Daniel had always used to keep him in line. You don't want to remember, Daniel would say, his voice slick with false concern. But now, with Lena's haunted gaze stripping him bare, Alexander realized Daniel hadn't been protecting him. He'd been imprisoning him. And then the twist you didn't see coming. A figure stepped from the shadows of the alley, his expensive shoes splashing through the rainwater like he owned the very ground they stood on. Daniel. But not the loyal friend Alexander thought he knew. This Daniel wore a smile sharp enough to draw blood. You really shouldn't have gone digging, Alex, he said, pulling out his phone to show a live security feed of Alexander's penthouse being torn apart by men in black suits. 12 years, and you still don't get it. That fire wasn't an accident. And he jerked his chin at Lena, was never supposed to survive either. Now, let's pause here. Because this is where the story splits open. Lena wasn't just some stranger seeking justice. She was the other survivor, the one who'd escaped the flames while her sister hadn't. And Daniel? He wasn't just a fixer. He was the architect. The fire, the cover-up, the missing girl, all of it led back to him. But why? That's the question clawing at Alexander's ribs as the storm howls around them. Because the answer isn't just about money or power. It's about something far more valuable, control. Daniel had spent years manipulating Alexander's life, his decisions, even his memories, all to keep him from realizing the empire he'd built was never really his. And Lena? She's not just a victim. She's the wild card. The one person Daniel never accounted for. Because while he'd been busy erasing the past, she'd been hunting it. And now, with the truth inches away, the storm isn't the only thing raging. There's a reckoning coming. A choice. Alexander can either walk away again, or finally face what he spent his life running from. But here's the catch. Daniel isn't the only one with secrets. Lena's hiding something too. Something about that night even she doesn't fully understand. So tell me what's more dangerous? The lie you've lived, or the truth you're about to uncover? Stick around. Stick around. Because the storm's not done yet. And neither are they. The penthouse was in ruins. The storm now a living thing, rattling the windows like it wanted in. Alexander pressed Lena against the wall, his body shielding hers as Daniel's men tore through the rooms just feet away. He could feel her breath against his neck quick, panicked, but her eyes were steady, locked onto his with a ferocity that made his chest ache. "You still don't remember, do you?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. And then she said the words that unraveled him. "You tried to save us." Flashbacks hit like lightning. The fire. The screaming. Not the drunken stupor Daniel had convinced him of, but a nightmare he'd buried Alexander stumbling through smoke, grabbing two girls' hands, pulling them toward the exit before a beam crashed down, separating them. He'd fought to go back, but Daniel had dragged him out, his grip like iron, his words a venomous lie. They're already gone. But one girl had escaped. Lena. And the sister in the photo? She hadn't died in the fire. She'd been taken. Here's the truth Daniel had killed to keep hidden. The fire was no accident. It was a cover-up. That coastal estate? A front for something far darker. A blackmail operation targeting the elite. Run by Daniel and a shadowy network even Alexander hadn't known about. The girls had seen something they shouldn't have. And while Daniel had convinced Alexander his guilt was from imagined, drunken recklessness, the real sin was his ignorance. He'd built his empire on a foundation of lies, with Daniel pulling every string. But the final twist? Lena's sister was alive. Held for years in a gilded prison, her existence proof to keep Lena silent. Until tonight. Because Daniel had grown reckless, and the storm had given Lena the chaos she needed to finally strike. She slipped a key into Alexander's palm, the location of a safe house, coordinates scrawled on the metal. "You want redemption?" she breathed. "Then finish what you started." The next moments were a blur. Alexander's body moving on pure instinct, years of boardroom ruthlessness sharpened into something lethal. He turned the Empire's security systems against Daniel's men, trapping them in elevators, locking doors, buying time. Outside, the city was a drowning beast, the streets flooded, the power flickering. Perfect. Because in chaos, even kings can fall. The confrontation with Daniel was short, brutal. No monologues, no grand reveals, just a gun trembling between them and the raw, ugly truth. Daniel hadn't just stolen Alexander's past. He'd stolen his humanity. The gunshot was swallowed by thunder, and when the police found Daniel's body the next morning, the storm would wash away the evidence. Epilogue? 3 days later, the sun finally broke through. Alexander stood at the door of a remote cottage, the key Lena had given him burning in his pocket. The woman who answered wasn't the girl from the photo, she was a ghost grown into a survivor, her eyes wary but alive. And when she recognized him, she didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply said, "Took you long enough." As for Lena, she was gone. No note, no trail. Just a single text hours later, debt paid. But Alexander knew better. Some storms don't end. They just change shape. And as he looked down at the sister's hand gripping his, the first real connection he'd felt in a lifetime, he understood. Redemption wasn't a destination. It was a choice. One he'd spend the rest of his life earning. So tell me, who do you become when the storm passes? The man you were, or the one the darkness revealed? The answer's in the silence after the rain. And if you listen close, you might just hear it.